When I'm fat and old, and my kids think I'm a joke, 'cause I move a little slow when I dance. I can count on you after all that we've been through, 'cause I know that you'll always understand. I won't act my age, no, I won't act my age, no, I'll still feel the same about you. When I'm fat and old, and my kids think I'm a joke, 'cause the stories that I told, I tell again and again. I can't count on you after all we got up to, 'cause I know that you truly understand. I won't act my age, no, I won't act my age, no, I still feel the same around you. I won't act my age, no, I won't act my age, no, I still feel the same, you will too. Hey! When I can hardly walk and my hair is falling out, we'll still stay out till morning. We'll throw the after party. Oh yeah, won't act my age, no, I won't act my age, no, I'll still feel the same around you. I won't act my age, no, I won't act my age, no, I'll still feel the same, you will too. I tried in vain 1,000 ways, my fears to quell, my hopes to raise. But what I need, your word has said, is ever only Jesus. You died, you live, you reign, you plead. There's love in all your words and deeds. This weary heart finds all it needs in ever only Jesus. 'Cause I want to know you, Jesus, my Lord, King of the heavens and King of my soul.
You can hear me. Good morning, everyone. How are we doing today? Good. Glad to have you here. We're going to start today off with number 8 in your hymnals, Praise to the Lord the Almighty, number 8. And would you please stand? Praise to the Lord the Almighty, the King of creation. O my soul, praise him, for he is thy health and salvation. All ye who hear, now to his temple draw near. Join me in glad adoration. Praise to the Lord, who o'er all things so wondrously reigneth, shelters thee under his wings, yes, so gently sustaineth. Hast thou not seen how all thy longings have been granted in what he ordaineth? Praise to the Lord, who doth prosper thy work and defend thee. Surely his goodness and mercy here daily attend thee. Ponder anew what the Almighty can do, if with his love he be friendly. Praise to the Lord, oh let all that is in me adore him. All that hath life and breath, come now with praises before him. Let the amen sound from his people again, gladly for we adore him. Thank you. Be seated.
Thank you, Mark. Good morning. Today I was really hoping to introduce my favorite speaker, but alas, he went to heaven about 2,000 years ago. But he did leave us a book. So today we've got Dr. Danny Faulkner here, which is another really great speaker. He's a respected voice in the creation astronomy, and he's authored several good books. There's The Created Cosmos and Falling Flat, and I believe there's one copy of Falling Flat left out there, and there's a couple of books out there, but that's all that is left. So if you want to get one of his books there, that's all that's remaining. So be quick about that. And then he also serves on the board of the Creation Research Society and edits the Quarterly Journal. He's speaks with a very gracious tone and always through the lens of God's Word. This morning, Dr. Faulkner is going to guide us through two awesome topics. There's going to be the light time travel problem and the wonder of God's creation. So today, expect carefully examined science. This guy's very careful with his science, and a good, clear teaching with a bit of levity, and a genuine love for God's Word. Would you join me in welcoming Dr. Danny Faulkner?
Well, good morning. I recognize many of you were here last night, and Mike, it's amazing they came back anyway. So, I'm delighted to be here. Oh, it's up. Good. All right. All right, I'll be talking, as he said, about the light travel time problem. And I can illustrate the problem. I think it's important to explain the problem before I answer the problem. And I can illustrate it with this title slide here. This is an object called NGC 4676. Don't you love the way astronomers name things? Those names just roll off the tongue, don't they? It's a couple of galaxies that appear to be interacting. Galaxies are large collections of stars. Our own galaxy is called the Milky Way. It has a couple of 100 billion stars in it. It's round and flat. It's kind of shaped like an over-easy egg. There's a bulge in the middle. In the summer Milky Way, you can see that bulge low on the horizon. if you've got a dark sky where you can see the Milky Way at all, because you're not going to see it in town, I'm guaranteed. And it's about 100,000 light years across and a few thousand light years thick, and we're located about halfway out from the center to the edge of the galaxy. These galaxies are a little weird looking. They're probably a couple of spiral galaxies, but they're messed up a little bit because they're very close together and interacting. The distance is believed to be about 300 million light years away from us. That's a long way, isn't it? Actually, in astronomy, it's not that far. It's almost nearby. And there's strong evidence of an ongoing process that the galaxies are interacting, and that presumably takes time, so we have to kind of think about that. So let me define the problem more clearly for you. By the way, this is a photograph of the Andromeda galaxy. It's very similar to our own galaxy. It's about a little over 2 million light years away. It's generally the most distant object you can see with the naked eye. This time of year, if you're in a really dark sky, with dark location with clear skies, you can see it pretty easily. Looks like a little nebulous patch in the sky. I've seen it many times. There are two little satellite galaxies. The thing to the upper right, that's a small orbiting satellite, small tiny galaxy, dwarf galaxy. Just below the center of the Andromeda galaxy is another one. The other spots you see there are all stars, and those are within our own Milky Way. They're much closer, only hundreds or thousands of light years. Nothing we're close to 2 million light years away from us. Now, from Genesis, we understand that the world was created in 6 normal days. There are some internal evidences you can use in Genesis 1 to understand their normal days. My favorite one is from verse 5. It's concluding the creation of light and separation of light from darkness on day 1 and of creation. And it says there in verse 5, and God called the light day, and the dark he called night, and the evening and morning were the first day. Notice that the text just defined what a day is. Now, the word day can have more than one meaning. The Hebrew word yom is the word for day, and in Hebrew it can have many of the same meanings we have in English. In fact, I've looked at a number of different languages, the Russian, Romance languages, Germanic languages, even Japanese, and their word for day has many of the same meanings that we have. So it's pretty universal, I think. However, it would be a very poor writing style to define a word and then immediately use a different definition than what you just defined it to be. And the Holy Spirit is not a poor writer. In fact, I understand in Hebrew there's a lot of structure found there that's kind of missed in translation many times. But even with the translation, you can see some of the interesting structure that shows up. It's a very well-written text, as it turns out. And I think it's inconceivable that you could have the word day defined as it is in verse 5 and immediately do it some other way. That's the argument I like. There are other arguments you can use as well. But it's pretty clear. In fact, if you talk to any world-class Hebraist, they will tell you clearly the author of Genesis 1 is trying to get across to you that these are 6 normal days that God used. There's no wiggle room, even though a lot of Christians try to have a lot of wiggle room there. It just simply doesn't work. Elsewhere in Genesis and the Old Testament, you find chronologies, genealogies that tell us things. We know that the flood was like 1,600 years after Adam. And if you follow the post-flood genealogies, you'll find that Abraham lived about 2,000 years after creation, give or take a couple of centuries, okay? A couple thousand years. And of course, we know from the genealogies found elsewhere in the Old Testament that it was about 2,000 years, give or take a few years, from Abraham to Christ. And we know from historical documentation that Jesus lived 2,000 years ago. So add it up, 2,000, 2,000, 2,000, you get about 6,000 years. I think a little more than that, but not much more than 6,000 years. To one significant figure, it is 6,000 years. Yet, I've just given you some examples of objects we see that are more distant than 6,000 light year. What is a light year? Sometimes I assume people know that, but I shouldn't assume that. It's the distance that light travels in a year. How fast does light travel? Well, it travels at 186,282 miles per second. That's really fast, isn't it? Only takes like a second or a third to get to the moon. And so when the Apollo astronauts were on the surface of the moon, it was about a 3-second delay. The people in mission control would ask them a question, and it would take them 3 seconds to get the answer because it took 1 1/3 seconds to get there. They had to think about the answer. It took 1 1/3 second to get back. Jupiter's about 40 minutes away. The sun's about 8 minutes away. Saturn's about an hour and 20 minutes away from us by light travel time problem. If you want to find out what a light year is, you multiply 186,282 miles per second by 60 seconds. That'll tell you how far a light minute is. Multiply by 60 minutes, tell you what a light hour is. Multiply by 365 and a quarter, a little less than a quarter days. You get about 6 trillion miles. Does that number even mean anything to you? I mean, the deficit right now for the federal government is like $38 trillion. Can you comprehend that number? If you can, you're better than I am, because I work with these kind of numbers all the time, and I don't think I really understand those numbers at all. So that's a light year. Now, if you go out at night and look at the stars, you're going to see stars that are typically a few dozens or a few hundred light years. The most distant star you can readily see at night is probably Deneb. It's out this time of year, high overhead, after the sky gets dark in the evening, and it's about, we think, 3,000 light years away from us. So the stars you see at night are not a problem for a 6,000-year-old creation, because there's more than enough time in 6,000 years to get light from all the nearby stars. The real problem starts occurring when you start looking at galaxies, and it was really only in recent times that people begin to understand how far away some of these objects are. So the big question is, how did the light get here? And so we call this the light travel time problem. I decided that my calling in life was to be an astronomer for God's glory and just proclaim creation to people. This happened as a sophomore in high school. That was way back in the 1900s for people. It's farther back than I would care to admit to. And I decided that, I needed to learn more about creation. And right away, it occurred to me that there was a problem here, because I believe creation was only 6,000 years ago, but how can you see all these distant objects? And I wrestled with this for like 40 years or more, something like that, close to 40 years. However, as I've just laid it out for you, the problem I don't think is properly formulated, because you see, the situation is even worse than that one. Let me try to give you the proper formulation. The stars were made on day 4. If you know the creation account, it was on day 4. By the way, I'm a really hardcore creationist, and I'm a little embarrassed to admit this to you, but I'll tell you just how hardcore I am. There was a popular Christian band a few years ago called Third Day. Y'all heard of Third Day? Yeah. About 25 years ago, I heard about it. They were already pretty popular, and I didn't know they were popular, but I was told among a group of young Christians, young men, young people, college students who were Christians. And I asked, I said, what, they grew out over dry land and plants? Somebody had to explain to me, no, it's because Jesus rose on the third. I'm probably the only person on the planet who didn't get that. Even a lot of pagans knew that. And if I had a band, what would I call my band? Fourth Day. You ready to be a member of my band? Don't be so fast, because you got to hear what instrument I play. Viola. It's right down there with banjos and bagpipes. It's really so you don't want to join my band, probably. But God made Adam on day 6. How many days later was that then from stars? 2, yeah. Some of you are awake this morning. So only 2 days. So that meant that Adam could only see things within 2 light days. And I already pointed out the sun's only 8 minutes. The moon only a fraction of 1 1/3 seconds. Saturn, the most distant planet you can see with the naked eye, is only 1 hour and 20 minutes. No problem. But how far away is the nearest star? Anybody know? That's 93 million miles is the Earth, the sun. Okay, the sun is a star. Okay, I'll discount that, all right? Yeah, I think you understood. I'm not talking about the sun. Other than the sun, what is the closest star? Anybody know? Okay, it's right there on the page. If you look down there, the little purple arrow is pointing to Alpha Centauri on the star chart there. Now, actually, technically, Proxima Centauri is a little closer. It's a three system, two stars orbiting close together, and a third one farther out. And that farther one out's a little closer than the other two, but it's so faint you need a good-sized telescope to see it. It's a really faint star. Alpha Centauri is actually one of the brighter stars in the sky. So we generally say Alpha Centauri. Anybody know how far away it is? Very good. Who said? Okay, Kent, you said it. 4.3 light years away. So if you see Alpha Centauri, and you can't because you have to go pretty far south. You can't see it this far north. I've seen it a number of times when I've been in the southern hemisphere. And it's the light you're looking at left that star, well, if you looked at it tonight, it would be from like sometime in mid part of 2021. All right, not too bad, but Adam had a problem with him. How could Adam see any stars at all? So you see, we stress over the most distant things in the universe, but if you look at Adam's light travel time problem, how did he see anything close by? You understand why the problem is worse than I said it. Now, if we can solve Adam's light travel time problem, do you think it will solve our life travel? I think it will. So let's concentrate on Adam's light travel time problem, and I think we can come up with a solution here. Now, if you ask me on the end of day 6, beginning of day 7, because you know the Hebrew reckoning of time, the day begins at sundown. So the seventh day begins, the sky starts to get dark, and Adam and Eve looked up at the sky for the first time at night, and what did they see? Assuming it wasn't cloudy that night. I think they saw pretty much what we see today. Why do I say that? Well, the stars must have been visible in order to fulfill their purposes. If you read the day 4 account, it's only 5 verses. If you read day 4 account, you'll find that there were several purposes given to the sun, the moon, and the stars. And in order for them to fulfill their purposes, they had to be visible. Otherwise, their purposes would not be completed. Now, at the end of day 4, God pronounced something. What did he say about the day 4 at the very end? He said, it was good. End of day 6, what did he say about the whole 6th day of creation? He said, it's very good. Do you know what the goodness of creation is? The goodness of creation refers to the completeness, that everything that God made is doing exactly what it was intended and what it was designed and made to do. And so on the basis of that, understanding what the goodness of creation is, Adam and Eve had to see those stars, all of them. So we need an answer to that. And over the years, there have been many, many, many answers. One of them, and this is one idea that I like for many years, it's what's called mature creation. Henry Morris was a big proponent of that. How many of you know who Henry Morris was? Raise your hands, please. Okay, not a bad return here. I had the pleasure of knowing him. Back in 1961, he and John Whitcomb wrote an incredible book called The Genesis Flood. How many people know about that book? How many of you have read that book? All right, very few hands left up still. It was a seminal work because, you see, the church had been in retreat for about 200 years, for millions of years, and the retreat stopped at that point because they put forth the theological and biblical and scientific arguments that, yeah, you really can believe that the world is young, and you really can believe that God created it recently, and you really can believe that there was a worldwide flood, and it changed everything. And if you're a 6-day recent creationist, I suspect most, if not all of you here today are, then you trace your lineage back through Henry Morris and John Whitcomb, who co-authored the book with him. And so you've been influenced by him, maybe not directly, but you've been influenced by people like me who are influenced. And I had, again, the pleasure of knowing not only Henry, but also John. They're both deceased now, but they were fine Christian gentlemen, good examples, and I respect them highly. Now, they suggested mature creation. That is, God basically created the light in transit to us. A problem I have with that is the fact that much of the universe need not exist at all. If we're simply seeing light coming from, say, the Andromeda Galaxy, and it never left that galaxy, then does that galaxy need to exist? Furthermore, there are processes going on. Back in 1987, there was a supernova seen in a satellite galaxy of the Milky Way, about 160,000 light years away from us. And that was not just light coming to us, but it contained a tremendous amount of information. The light changed in brightness. They looked at the spectrum. They saw a lot of information about details of the process that took place. And if the light were created in transit, none of those processes ever happened. I do eclipsing binary research. I've been doing that for going on 45 years. And the These are two stars. They're close together. You can't see the individual stars because they're so close together. It looks like a single star. But as they orbit, if we lie near the orbital plane, one star will pass in front of the other, and the light will dim and recover and dim and recover. And by studying those light curves, measuring how they vary in brightness, we can model the system and come up with things like how far apart the stars, how massive they are, how they're shaped. They're so close together. Some of the systems I look at only take 8 hours to orbit one another, not like a year the Earth takes. And these are sun-type stars, so they're kind of bulge like eggs like this, and material slops between them. We can see evidence of bright spots on them where material is going from one star to the other. We can see dark spots we think are sunspots, all sorts of detailed information. Well, the ones I look at are typically hundreds or maybe a few thousand light years away from us. But some of my colleagues in the field, people I know, use the HST, the Hubble Space Telescope, to observe eclipsing binary stars in the Andromeda Galaxy. They had a good reason for doing it. And those eclipses never happened if the light was created in trance. You see the problem I have there? It's a kind of deceptive thing about the universe. Then there's a guy named Barry Setterfield 40 years ago who thought he saw in historical evidences measurements of the speed of light that it changed. It was much greater in the past. He thought if it was nearly infinite at the beginning of creation and exponentially decayed to today, then perhaps that's how the light got here. And a lot of us were really excited when that first came out, but then we began to think about it. And number one, I've looked at the evidence that he put forth, and it doesn't convince me that there's really been a significant change in the speed of light historically. And the other problem is the speed of light is not just some constant you can change, because it depends on two other fundamental constants, the permittivity and permeability of free space. You all know what that is, right? Well, very simply, they determine the strength or measure the strength of interactions of matter with electricity, like the electrons orbiting around the nucleus of the atom, and also the magnetic properties. As they go around, they produce a little current, and it tells you what that magnetic field being produced is. You can't change the speed of light much at all without changing that. If you do that, you change everything, the structure of matter. So to me, it's inconceivable that you could actually have that changing. Then Russ Humphreys, back 30 years ago, came up with what he called the white hole's cosmology. And he pursued that. A lot of people still, how many people have heard of his white hole cosmology? Only a handful. Okay, that's good. Because you see, I don't need to tell you much about it, because eventually Russ abandoned the white hole cosmology, and he got on to what I call Humphreys 2.0, a different version using general relativity. I would tell you about that, but Russ has since moved on to Humphreys 3.0, and he keeps moving forward. He's kind of abandoned both of his earlier models. And Russ told me a few years ago he was working on number 3, and he said, Danny, we're now in violent agreement on things. Turns out his position's kind of moved closer to mine. We're not totally agreed, but hey, he's a good friend, so I enjoy it. He likes to say violent agreement on things. John Hartnett pursued a type of alternate physics, general relativity, called Carmelian physics. He met with Moshe Carmeli, was a Jewish Italian theoretical physicist, and pursued this, thinking it had a good solution. He eventually abandoned that, as it turns out. There's something going on with those solutions. They keep abandoning these things. And then, of course, you may have heard of Jason Lyle's anisotropic synchrony convention, ASC for short. I don't need to talk about that much today. It's one that's really discussed quite a bit. And I have problems with all of these. One problem I have with these relativistic solutions, which some of these are here, including Jason's, is the fact that it's trying to answer this problem we have going back to the creation week, using current physics to do that. In fact, when I first started developing what I'm going to share with you in a few minutes here, Russ heard about it, and he called me and wanted to talk about it. And I sat in my office, this is like 20 years ago, a little over 20 years ago. When I got done, he said, well, Danny, I have a physical mechanism for that. And I said, but you don't understand, Russ, I'm not looking for a physical mechanism. Think about it. Was God using a bunch of physical mechanisms during the creation week? No, there was no life, and then there was. There was no human, and then there was. There was no light, and then there was. There was no matter, and then there was. Those are not natural processes, folks. That's not the way the world works today. You go through the creation week, and everything in the creation week appears to me to be miraculous. So why is it that we get to one thing in the creation week, we go, no, we can't have a miracle here. It has to be done physically. That's inconsistent. It's also uniformitarianism. You all heard of that word? They're trying to use things that they work today during the creation week. I think we need to be very careful about that. So I'm not afraid as a scientist to say I think God performed a miracle there, because otherwise, what other miracles didn't God do? So I like the miraculous. And so I want to do a little review here with the eye of where I'm going. I developed this idea a little over 20 years ago. I didn't publish it until about a dozen years ago. But I note during the creation week, God, the verb used there is bara. And when you want to know which verb is being used, just look at the word. If it says create or created, be assured that the word bara is being used. And many people say that it only refers to ex nihilo creation, that is out of nothing. I don't think that's quite correct. And many people say that it's something new that didn't exist before, and I don't think that's really correct at all either. What I do find interesting is that that verb bara is used only as God is a subject. Apparently God can bara, he can create, but man cannot. That's significant to me. Now the other verb that's used during the creation work is asa, and if you want to know where it's used, just look for the word made or make in Genesis 1, and you'll know immediately he's using the word asa. And by the way, man can asa. We can make things. We can't bara, but we can asa, apparently, in biblical terms. And many people say, well, it's to make fashion out of existing material. You know, God had to create stuff at the very beginning, or even during the creation week, but I think he made stuff out of stuff that he already created out of nothing some point during the creation week. Some people think that the two words are interchangeable, and there is some argument there for that, but I think not in every case. I think in many situations when it says bara, it would be incorrect to say it's make, it's asa, unless it's warranted somehow. And what I find interesting that on the day 4 account, my big day of the week, God uses asa consistently to describe what he did. I think that may be significant. I'm not sure what that means. It suggests to me that maybe God on day 4 formed the heavenly bodies out of material he created earlier in the week. Maybe not. Now, 2 important things. Again, I've already mentioned this, but I need to drive it home once more. We creation scientists often underestimate the role of the miraculous during the creation week. And I got that beaten out of my head a number of years ago, but I think some of my creation brethren don't like that. What I'm going to share with you, I think, I find with lay audiences it sells very well. In fact, I've had some laymen tell me, well, that's what I've always thought. I go, well, silly me, it took me decades to get there. Sometimes education gets in the way of things, unfortunately. So lay people seem to like it, but the blowback I get is from creation scientists, particularly the physicists out there. Not so much the astronomers, but the physicists we have. So was it miraculous during the creation week? Again, I think everything else was there. And if you're going to say, well, you need a physical mechanism for that, I would suggest you give me a physical mechanism for the virgin birth of the resurrection. I think everyone recognizes those were not physically done, normally done. Something different happened, very different happened. And I want to contrast the creation week with the sustaining we see today. It's mentioned in Hebrews 1:3 and also Colossians 1:16 and 17. It speaks those two passages. I'll kind of blend them together there of the Lord sustaining the creation by the power of his word. You know, we tend to think of sustenance, sustaining, I should say, of the creation of ongoing today as being the normal state of things, non-miraculous. But if the Lord is really sustaining, upholding the creation moment by moment, what would happen if he stopped sustaining or upholding the creation? I think it would cease to exist, catastrophically perhaps. So as it turns out, even the normal, non-miraculous things we see going on in the world today are actually kind of a miracle too. It's just hidden from us in the sense that we take it for granted. That's the way God normally operates the universe. And by the way, this makes physics possible and science possible because we have this uniformity in nature, not uniformitarianism, but uniformity in nature. I have assurance from what I've observed and many people ever have that if I go to the lab one day and do an experiment and I discover principles like conservation of momentum and conservation of energy and things like this, conservation of mass, I think the next day it will do the same and the next day it will do the same. I have a good anticipation. That's part of that sustaining. And God is a God of order and a God of decrees. And I think he's imprinted some of that characteristic on the world around us. It makes the world knowable just as he is knowable. And that's what allows the approaches to science to work, we can actually understand the world around us. And it's no accident, by the way, this is a little history of science. Do you know where modern science, it came around in the 1600s, 400 years ago. Do you know where it happened for the most part? Protestant Europe. Protestant Europe. I have a whole talk I give on that. That's not, and even some agnostics and atheists have noted that science as we know it is a product of Protestant Europe. Boy, has science changed over the years. I think it was the so-called Enlightenment that changed all of that. You remember learning about the Enlightenment growing up in history classes? If you had Christian education, hopefully they set you straight on that. But I felt cheated because they had told the Enlightenment being this great thing. Suddenly, we were able to get past all the strictures of religion and Christianity and able to finally think for the first time. And that's nonsense, utter nonsense. I think the Enlightenment was a disaster. I think it was the third greatest disaster to fall humanity. And I've got a three-point. If you've got a preacher, I've got a three-point outline for you with alliteration, knowing where the Enlightenment came from. You have the fall, then the flood, and then France. So you've got a great sermon outline there with alliteration, 3 points I've just given you on that. So I believe in the sustaining, but it's different from the creating. And another point I want to make is I think we perhaps can interpret certain days of creation in terms of some of the things that God did on other days. So if he did something on day 2, maybe he did a similar thing on day 5 or day 4 or whatever. There's a consistent pattern here. He gives us details on each of the days. Not as many details as we like many times, but I think God is consistent. So maybe if he did something on one day a certain way, he might do it on a different way. And what really got me thinking about my solution to the light travel time problem is thinking about day 3. What did God make on day 3? Dry land, I told you earlier, dry land and plants. Anybody recognize what fruit that is? Pomegranate. Yeah, I'm not really familiar with pomegranate. I only ate it once in my life. And you can't buy them in the grocery stores typically. And so I was someplace a few years ago, and I happened to see this fruit, and I recognized what it was. I was really proud of myself. So I took a picture of that. I thought it's really a cool photo. So it's going to illustrate day 3, particularly since I'm talking about this. And particularly verse 11 and 12, God deals with the creation of plants. He already made the dry land and separated the seas to get the dry land. And in verse 11 it says, let the earth bring forth grass and herb and tree bearing fruit with a seed inside the fruit. And the next verse it says, and the earth brought forth grass and seed and herb and so forth. Same sort of thing. And I've read this countless times. Bring forth, brought forth. And I thought it was just the same verb being used, maybe with a different verb tense. Imagine my shock a few years ago, 20 years ago, when I looked it up and I found out that in verse 11 and verse 12, God used 2 different verbs. As I said, Genesis was written well. It's not good to repeat words. Sometimes when I'm typing something, writing something, I'll get flagged to say, you use that word too often, And it's not when I'm proofing my stuff, I'll look. If I use a word, not a common word, but other words, if I use it twice in one sentence, I got to think of a synonym for that other one because it's just a better writing style. So the Lord did that too, though in the English translation it may not show up very well. And I was curious, what kind of meanings could it have? So I consulted a few other translations. That's the King James, bring forth, brought forth, a great translation, by the way. But then RSV says put forth. Okay, sounds similar. The NASB said sprout, and the NIV says produce. And all of those kind of sound similar, but I looked up the meaning of the word, and I got across something interesting here. Looking at both words, they're found in verses 11 and 12 as well. And looking at those, they have overlapping meanings, so they can be used interchangeably as the Lord did there. But when I look at it, I get the impression it's something that's very dynamic, something that's really happening fast. So when I looked those words up, I sat back in my chair and I thought about, if I would have been there on day 3, what would I have seen? And I imagine it's like a time-lapse video with the plants coming up out of the ground like this. You have little sapling come up, it grows in girth and height, branches come out, maybe leaves bud out, and then leaves and catkins and flowers and fruit. All that might take months for a garden plant, it might take decades for a tree, all taking place within one day, a matter of minutes or hours at the most. Has anybody seen Eric Hoven's movie, Genesis, Paradise Lost? Anybody seen that? I think I make a brief appearance in that movie as well. And We used to show at the Creation Museum, I don't know if we still do, in the FX Theater, the first 15, 20 minutes of that movie, and they get to day 3, and it's exactly as I pictured. Eric did a fantastic job on that. You hear this creaking and crackling, and you see these things coming up out of the ground, and it's just exactly how I pictured it. I wasn't the only one who saw that. So what we saw was, by the way, the words there don't suggest ex nihilo at all. It says they came out of the ground, and they suggest a very rapid process. Normal growth, but abnormally quickly that it happened. Very rapid process. And I think you have to do that. If you're doing creation in 6 days, you better be pretty rapid about what you do. I wrote a paper a number of years ago about how God, I think, formed the moon and other heavenly bodies, the planets and so forth on day 6. And so many people just wanted, on day 4, so many people just want it to be ex nihilo and instantaneous. But if you read the creation account, it doesn't say that at all. In fact, ex nihilo is a Latin term that came later. That doesn't appear in the Bible at all. But I've had arguments with other creationists about this. They want to argue that everything was instantaneous. Poof, there's a tree when clearly the text says otherwise. Poof, there's a whale when the text says otherwise. Poof, there's man. Well, that's not the case because he formed him out of the dust of the ground and breathed in his nostrils, and with the breath of life became a living soul, it says. And if you, by the way, if you look in chapter 2, and I missed this, I think around verse 17, I missed this so many times reading it. It says that the land animals and the birds came out of the ground as well. The plants came out of the ground. Yeah, you caught it. I never caught it. Somebody almost point that out to me. Again, you get blinders on. And I, for a long time, thought everything was ex nihilo. And then suddenly I realized, no, it's not. And I can't believe people who really study the Word come up with that conclusion, because that's not what the text says. God is using a process through all of these things. So the creation week, I see playing out on various days, rapid process. And I suggested then that God didn't just poof make the moon instantly, but that God assembled it from material he'd already created, ex nihilo, or I should say bara, and then made it on day 4. And I think many of the craters in the moon are kind of the last bits of assembly taking place. And when I published that, I had another creation scientist out there accusing me of naturalism and evolutionary ideas in millions of years, and I thought I made it very clear what I was talking about. Sometimes your critics just don't want to listen to what you actually say. They want to make a straw man argument about it. I believe that God made a rapid formation of stars on day 2. I don't think he just poof created them out of nothing instantaneously. I think he formed them, but very rapidly as he did plants on day 3. And following that same sort of thing, remember what he did is he caused the plants the earth to bring forth these plants, bring them up out of the ground very rapidly. So why couldn't have God done the same thing with light? God creates these things very quickly, or makes them, I should say, and then he brings the light here very rapidly. Otherwise, you're not going to get this all taking place and be visible, and it won't be very good as God declared it to be. This had to happen at least by day 6 when man was around, but I really think it happened on day 4 because on there it said it was good, and it wouldn't be good if it wasn't doing what it had to do. So it had to really be by day 4. Now, it's very tempting to talk about the 11 passages in the Old Testament, in the poetic and prophetic books, talking about the stretching of the heavens. And again, some of the people in physics and astronomy and the creation science movement, they want to appeal to that, but I think it's a better fit to day 2, as it turns out. So I'm appealing to a miracle that takes place on day 4 to bring this light rapidly to the earth. And I want to compare that to some of the other suggestions out there that people have. The white hole cosmology and other relativistic solutions, by the way. Again, I'm looking for miraculous. I'm not looking for a physical mechanism. And the white hole or other types of general relativistic approaches would be looking at physical mechanisms. As far as mature creation, the light that we're seeing in my approach to this, my solution, is that the light actually left those. I believe the light left the Andromeda Galaxy and came to the Earth. Now, the Andromeda Galaxy, I believe, is a little more than 2 million light years away from us, but I don't think the light's been traveling that long. Because if God rapidly brought this, then I'm looking at the thing close to real time. I think the light I'm looking at probably traveled a little over 6,000 years to get here, the light I'm now seeing. But 6,000 years compared to 2 million years is pretty close to real time, isn't it? So we're seeing the universe as something close to real time. But you know, with the mature creation, the light never actually left those distant objects at all. Didn't have to, couldn't have, because the distance is too great. And so do they even need to exist? Well, a few other considerations I really need to share with you. As soon as I published this a dozen years ago, before I did actually, I had to wrestle with this question, and I still wrestle with it because I don't have a good answer yet. But there ought to be a transition between the creation week and the sustaining, or the upholding as we see today. After all, there was a big discontinuity between day 6 and day 7. So there should be some sort of transition. What was that transition like? And I haven't a clue what it was like. Because we are talking about the miraculous. We can talk about different miracles that Jesus performed, like the feeding of the 5,000 with a few loaves of bread, a few fish. And what were the fish like? They're probably like any other fish. Had you shown up to the party a little late, or maybe they took up like 12 baskets of scraps that they gave out probably later. If you would have been a recipient, someone came to your door and said, "We got some food here if you want." "Oh, thank you, we need food." If you would have taken that fish, you might not have realized there was anything different about it. And what about the bread? Probably the same thing. And of course, it takes time for fish to grow. From an egg to a mature fish, it takes time to catch the fish and clean it and then cook it. And the bread, you got to grow the wheat or the rye or the barley, whatever it was, and then you have to make it, harvest that, get the mill the grain, make flour, and then put yeast in it, presumably, and we get it rise and bake it. All those, it never happened. It never happened. But could you tell the difference between bread done the normal way and the way the Lord did it? And the answer is no. I don't think so. There's an argument from silence. Nobody said, "Hey, this bread's really different," or "this food." They didn't say that. I'm thinking the fact that everybody thought it was normal bread and fish, they probably couldn't tell the difference at all. So, do I need to worry about the transition then? Perhaps not. People have asked me this question. I say, I don't know, but maybe we don't need to worry about it at all. I don't know the answer to that. As I pointed out, I think we're seeing the universe in something close to real time. Last night I showed you some images of galaxies believed to be 12 and 13 billion light years away from us. I think they're really that far away, perhaps, but the light hasn't been traveling nearly that light travel time at all. I think it's more like 6,000 years. Again, that's close to real time. Now people say, well, wait a minute, what about the curse? You know, you've got supernova, like the one that happened in 1987. That must have happened maybe during the creation week. Black holes, those seem to be pretty bad things. Did God make those at the beginning of time? And I think God made black holes. Black holes are really neat things. They kind of stretch our understanding of things to a great extent. But what about the curse? We've got to be very careful. The curse is mentioned explicitly in chapter 3 of Genesis, after the fall. And there are 3 parts to that. It cursed the serpent. It cursed the ground for Adam's sake. It was to give toil and labor, and by the sweat of his brow he'd earn his bread. He didn't have to do that before. It was hard work before. It was like a hobby. And it also childbirth upon the woman, and upon, I think, also the relationship between men and women. If you don't understand why we don't really understand everybody all the time, then it goes back to the curse once again. But you see, the fall here had other implications. The Romans 8, I mentioned last night, tells us that the taint of man's sin affects all of creation. But you got to be theologically, I've had some theologians correct me on this. You need to be careful not to call that the curse, because the curse is very specifically found in chapter 3, but it did have ramifications across all of creation. You know about how men and women just don't communicate very well, right? We love each other, we need each other, but boy, can we have some misunderstandings. I'll give you an example. I usually do this in another talk I give, but I'll share it with you now. Sometimes I'm in a situation like this. I'm speaking publicly. Maybe I'm just in a social situation, people around, and my wife may be present. She's not today, but if she's in the room, I can look at her at some point, and I can see this look she gives me. I call it the look. And you men and women, you know what? When I talk about this, the women get a bigger charge out of this than the men do for some reason. And when I get this look, I know one of 4 things has just happened. I either said something I shouldn't have said, I didn't say something I should have said, I did something I shouldn't have done, or I didn't do something I should have done. Did that pretty much cover it, folks? And I know it's one of those four, but I haven't a clue which one because I'm a man, you know, and she's a woman. And she thinks it's obvious, and she's communicating with me, but not very well. I'm not getting the message. Again, I give this, all the women chuckle more than men. The men kind of sit there and sweat and sit on their hands. It's interesting how that interaction takes place. I do have a point about that I make. It comes down to what's called general and special revelation. And general revelation comes from Psalm 19:1 and a few verses afterwards in Romans 1:19 and 20. The heavens do tell us that the world around us, I should say, expanded, that God exists and he's very powerful. But it doesn't tell you much more than that, does it? General revelation is kind of vague. We better be very careful how we interpret it. But I love the specificity you find in things. And I think I may mention this again next hour, okay? But repetition's good, right? Repetition's good? Repetition's good, isn't it? All right. So just kind of a foretaste of what may come next hour. Another question. Does the destruction of the heavens we hear about in Isaiah 65 and 66 and also in 2 Peter 3 and Revelation 21, does that refer to the astronomical heavens? Now, as it turns out, I believe John Whitcomb and Henry Morris, who I respected tremendously, didn't agree with me on that. They thought that it refers just to the atmospheric heavens, not the celestial heavens. And I just respectfully disagree with them. I think they're wrong. I think it refers to all of creation because all of creation is affected by the taint of man's sin. I don't mean any disrespect to them. They staked out a lot of positions. They were pioneers in this field, and they staked out a lot of positions, far more positions than I'll ever stake out. At the end of my life, if my batting average is even half as good as theirs, I'll be pleased, because we're all going to be wrong about some things. Well, I'm finished a little earlier than I normally would be. Do you have any questions for me this morning about what I talked about, other aspects of creation? Things I might know the answer to? Yeah. Yes.
But it sounds like with your theory, you're saying that the speed of light
changes, or did change, or was different. Okay, the question is, I'll repeat it for everybody. I said earlier on that the speed of light is a constant. It's a physical constant. And I'm suggesting, if you understand correctly, the speed of light was very different on day 4. And indeed it was, I believe. But keep one thing in mind, we're talking about the creation week. And when I say the speed of light is a constant fixed by two fundamental constants that govern the structure of matter, that's today. That's part of the upholding, sustaining. So the rules are very different back then. God was doing things differently. As an example, I think the second law of thermodynamics was in play from the very beginning. It's a common position. Used to be that they thought the second law came in at the time of the curse, but I think it was there from the very beginning. I have good reasons for that. But were all the laws of physics in place during the creation week, or at the end of creation week, or sometime during creation week? I don't know. That's an interesting question. And again, we should not underestimate the role of the miraculous during the creation week. We should separate that from the way things work today. So we're perfectly fine in having the speed of light be infinite, perhaps, during day 4, but then God slowed it down after that to what it is today. And at some point between day 4 and day 7, it assumed the status that it has today, being relying upon those two fundamental constants. Does that help?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think
That was a great question, by the way,
you don't really have the answer to when that.
and how that happened. And I don't think I can. I mean, I don't really understand miracles. Absolutely. Give people a chance to come up with questions over the next 10 minutes.
So you mentioned the second law of thermodynamics. Just so we're on the same page, that's an object that stays at rest.
No, that's first law of motion of Newton. The second law of thermodynamics, it states that in an isolated system, the entropy of the system always increases. Entropy is a slippery concept. You can say that it's a measurement of disorder in a system. You don't have to disorder systems. You can put together a finely crafted piece of machinery And with just normal wear and tear, it will fall apart. Our bodies are doing the same thing. I'm getting older, things don't work as well as they used to because I'm falling apart. That's an example, the second law of thermodynamics. And it's dissipation of order and even energy in the universe. And again, it's a common position 50 years ago among creationists that the second law didn't exist until the fall, but I believe it was there at least since the seventh day of creation, if not a little sooner. Does that help?
It does, but my question is, one of the common things, and I'm a six-day creationist, I'm not trying to be an antagonist here.
Yeah,
So,
I like the challenge. Go ahead.
so if the speed of light has a constant change, one of the answers to, well, why did the Big Bang happen? Well, because an object at rest stays at rest unless acted by an object.
Okay.
If we can change the constants, then
Yeah.
give me the liberty to do that as well.
Yeah. The question is, applying that miraculous or suspension of the rules today, before the rules were in place, why couldn't the Big Bang happen? The argument you used against the Big Bang I would never use, but keep in mind within the Big Bang model, it's at its heart is an atheistic model. It's not a theistic model at all. People, some Christians I know and know well, believe in the Big Bang. They think that's how God did it. Basically, in the beginning, with the Big Bang, God created the heavens and the earth, is how they might loosely interpret Genesis 1:1. But if you are an atheistic sort of person, then you have to believe that all the laws of physics as we know them were set in place when the Big Bang happened. You don't have the option of invoking miracles in the past because you don't believe in miracles. As Christians, Bible-believing people, we know that miracles happen. And so during the creation week, it was miraculous, so we're free to invoke that. But you can't invoke that if you don't accept the premise of creation. Yeah. All right. Other questions? Unless you got a follow-up again. Anybody else? Yes?
The expansion of, miraculous expansion of the universe, Satan type of things, miraculous changes, light speed. I'm not talking about Big Bang.
Yeah. The question about the miraculous expansion of the universe that several verses in the Old Testament speak about, could it be related to this expansion of the speed of light? And if you're going to try to invoke those 11 passages that speak of God stretching out the heavens on day 4, then yes. But as it turns out, I think a much better fit is on day 2 when God made the firmament. Better rendering of that is expanse. That's what the word means. I think that's referring to the expanse that God made on day 2. And I have a presentation about that, but I'm not giving that this trip. Maybe in a future trip I can. But it, I believe, is the creation of the space of the universe. The very beginning of creation, the first day of creation, all that existed was the earth and nothing else. And this will blow your mind. Not even space outside the earth existed. I can't fathom what no space is. But I believe that's exactly what happened. That help? So I'm reluctant to invoke expansion on day 4 to explain the light travel time problem. A lot of the physicists in our midst try to do that, and I don't think it's a good fit at all. I think the better fit is on day 2, not day 4. I may be wrong, but I don't think I am. All right. Other questions? Yes?
Perhaps you covered this and I missed it. What is the primary motivation for rejecting versus mature creation?
Oh,
Things were created in transit or fully formed versus your rapidly.
yeah. Yeah, he liked to call it, rather than light created in transit, he liked to call it mature creation. His argument that God made the universe mature to start with, just as Adam was not created as an embryo and had to grow up, he was probably, would have appeared to us as a healthy adult male that we have today. There are a lot of precedent for that sort of thing. The problem I have is that it's not just a matter of lights in the sky. Stars and galaxies have far more information than that. We can analyze the light that we receive and infer from that all sorts of physical processes that never happened. And that comes across as deceptive to me. That I can see eclipses of eclipsing binary stars that never occurred. I can see, we can see from the supernova that never occurred. On and on it goes. Much of the universe need not exist at all because the light is just simply like a show that God's putting on for us. And it's kind of fake. And that's problematic for me personally.
By that same token, could you point to a healthy atom and say that alone is evidence of a thing that grew that never was there?
Except that God made it a certain way. Did Adam have a belly button? You laugh, but David Minton, I don't know if you know the name, he was an anatomist, taught anatomy at the George Washington Medical School, University Medical School for a number of years. He also worked for Answers in Genesis until his death a few years ago. And he said, yes, Adam had a navel. His argument was that it was not simply a scar from where the umbilical cord was connected, because Adam never had an umbilical cord. That's at least many people say he never had a navel. But as an anatomist, he told me that the navel actually serves a purpose. It's anchoring some things in the abdomen. It serves a purpose. Did trees in the garden have growth rings? And I think that they did. The reason being, if you didn't have growth rings in a tree, like an oak tree, those growth rings give structure to the tree. And it gives support. It's like the steel structure of a skyscraper. Take that away and the building can't stand. So it could be that during the creation week there were pulses of rapid growth that occurred, like a 1 year's worth of bark growth. Another year could have happened. So that gets into the nasty question of what ifs. We don't have answers to those questions, but I see your point, but I still think it's deceptive. Got a quick one left. We've got just a couple of minutes. Otherwise, we'll just in the back. One last question. Yeah.
If there's a possibility of just a light show that God's presenting us with, that doesn't exist, actually that never existed, it's just a display of light for us to see, is that if that spot never doesn't exist, our universe is big as what we're protecting it to be.
Are you asking why did God make the universe as big as He did?
Is it really that big?
Yeah. Yeah, very, very good question. He's basically asking, well, to solve this problem is maybe the universe isn't as big as it is. There are really good reasons for believing it's that large. I have a presentation I could give on how we know how large the universe is. I don't have time to do that. I've written about it on our website. The question is really, given that the universe is that big, why did He build it that big? And at the risk of sounding irreverent, I suggest that maybe our Creator was just kind of showing off a little bit. Because the universe, can you imagine how big the universe is? I mean, billions and billions of light years. Again, I don't think you can. No matter how big you might think it is, trust me, it's far bigger than that. And it takes a God far bigger than that to make a universe that big. And I think it's this late date in a time we can appreciate more than ever in history that the universe is so big and God is even bigger still. So it gives me a lot of deep appreciation and reverence for who God is. Thank you very much. Last words, Mike?
Can we give a big hand? Thank you. And just to add on to what the good doctor said here too, I don't believe God would ever try and deceive.
Who said that to me? But I'm gonna pray a minute, and then you'll be excused until 10:30. We'll start our normal Sunday morning service. Father, we thank you once again for who you are, what you're doing, what you will do. We thank you for bringing Dr. Faulkner here today, for what we've learned. God, you are so amazing. The more we dig into your word, the more we study it, the more we know, the more we grow closer to you. And Lord, we thank you for just giving us minds to understand, giving us the Holy Spirit to interpret for us, and giving us smart people that you put on this earth to help guide us as well. Lord, we ask that you will bless this service coming up and that you will be honored in Jesus' name.